It began not in a factory, but on a battlefield. Normandy, June 1944. The invasion had begun. Above the beaches, the sky was filled with the sound of engines, deep, synchronized, unrelenting. Soldiers below heard a rhythm that cut through the chaos, a steady, metallic pulse. It wasn't music, but it carried the same certainty as a heartbeat. That sound was the Rolls-Royce Merlin. A 27-liter V12 engine, liquid-cooled, supercharged, and alive. 12 cylinders, 2 banks of 6, producing over 1,600 horsepower at takeoff. Each piston moved with surgical precision, 3,000 times a minute. Each exhaust pulse rolled across the battlefield like thunder. The Merlin turned aviation fuel into air superiority. It powered the Spitfire, the Hurricane, the Lancaster bomber. And across the ocean, it powered the P-51 Mustang, the aircraft that carried the war from the beaches of Normandy to the skies above Berlin. But the story of that engine and the victory it helped secure does not begin in the air. It begins in a small factory that once built toys. In Manchester, England, the Fisher and Ludlow Toy Company once produced miniature cars and model trains for British children. By 1939, its presses stamped tin and brass into shapes of play. By 1940, those same presses were reshaped to stamp crankcases, supercharger impellers, and connecting rods. The factory's transformation was total. The laughter of children was replaced by the noise of machines. The colors of enamel paints gave way to the dull gray of steel dust. And where once there had been toys, there were engines built for killing, built for survival. The irony was stark, even poetic. A company that once produced joy had become an instrument of destruction. But history would remember it differently. That toy factory built the engines that helped save the free world. The Merlin engine was not an accident of genius. It was an accumulation of refinement, iteration, and obsession. Its lineage began in the 1,930 seconds in the quiet hangars of Rolls-Royce's Derby plant. Engineers there pursued one question: how much power can a piston engine endure before it tears itself apart? From that question emerged a design built around balance and endurance. The specifications read like a technical symphony. Configuration: 60 degrees V12, liquid-cooled. Displacement: 27 liters, 1,648 cubic inches. Weight: 1,640 pounds. Compression ratio: 6:1:6, 75:1. Supercharger boost: 9 pounds per square inches early to 18 pounds per square inches later, 2-stage versions. Output: 1,030 HP, Merlin I to 1,720 HP, Merlin the 66. Service ceiling: 35,000 feet. Each component had to survive forces that would shatter ordinary metals. Each engine required more than 10,000 precision parts, each measured to tolerances thinner than a human hair. By 1939, Rolls-Royce could produce a few hundred engines a month. By 1940, the demand had multiplied tenfold. Britain needed thousands every month. Factories were being bombed. Skilled labor was drafted to the front. So the Ministry of Aircraft Production initiated what came to be known as the Shadow Factory scheme, a plan to scatter engine production across hundreds of small workshops and subcontractors. The Fisher and Ludlow Toy Company became one of them. Within months, it was no longer a toy manufacturer. It was an auxiliary Rolls-Royce facility. Women, teenagers, and retirees filled the workbenches once staffed by men. They learned to read blueprints, calibrate micrometers, polish piston heads until they shone like mirrors. Many had never seen an airplane, but their hands would soon build the hearts of thousands. They worked 12-hour shifts under blackout curtains. Air raid sirens interrupted their nights, bomb blasts rattled their windows, yet the production lines never stopped. The toy factory, and hundreds like it, kept the Merlin alive. Every Merlin was both a masterpiece and a contradiction. It demanded the precision of a watch and the brutality of a furnace. Each crankshaft was forged from high-carbon steel and machined to tolerances of 1/10,000th of an inch. Each connecting rod was balanced by hand. The engine block cast in aluminum alloy underwent 1,800 individual operations before completion. Rolls-Royce engineers called it manufactured perfection. Workers called it madness. In Manchester, the transformation bordered on surreal. The same die presses once used to form toy train wheels now produced the casings for magnetos and superchargers. Paint ovens became heat-treating furnaces. And the workers, mostly women, became machinists overnight. Ellen Davies, a former assembler, later said, "We never thought of ourselves as part of the war. But every part we made was a promise that someone, somewhere, would come home." The psychological shift was immense. Before the war, these workers had built toys for children. Now they built engines for death. Yet many spoke of pride, not horror, because in total war, morality was replaced by necessity. Each part had meaning. Each bolt, each bearing, each piston ring was an act of defiance. When the first Merlins from the toy factory passed inspection, engineers marked the crates with small stamps shaped like toy trains. It was a quiet symbol, a code that said, "This engine came from the children's factory." Those crates would be loaded onto trains, shipped to Derby, then to fighter bases across southern England. By the time the Battle of Britain began, hundreds of those toy engines were already flying. July 1940, the Luftwaffe attacked Britain. Every day, hundreds of German bombers crossed the Channel. Every day, the RAF scrambled to meet them. At the center of that defense was the Merlin. A Spitfire or Hurricane could climb faster, turn tighter, and outlast its German opponent, not because of armor or guns, but because of its engine. At 30,000 feet, the Merlin's supercharger delivered oxygen to every cylinder as though it were at sea level. Pilots trusted it with their lives. "When you opened the throttle," one pilot recalled, "the aircraft didn't just move, it surged. It felt alive." When German bombs struck Coventry, they destroyed critical factories. The toy factory in Manchester increased its output to compensate. Engines destroyed in the raids were replaced by engines built at night by women who had never seen a battlefield. By the end of 1940, 16,000 Merlins had been produced. Half of them came from shadow factories like Fisher and Ludlow. Every dogfight in the sky was mirrored by a quieter battle on the ground, a race between production and destruction. When America entered the war, the scale changed again. Britain had skill. America had space. In 1941, Rolls-Royce sent blueprints of the Merlin to the Packard Motor Company in Detroit. It was an act of trust and desperation. The blueprints were written in thousandths of an inch. The Americans converted them to imperial decimals. At first, nothing fit. Fittings jammed, bolts misaligned. But by 1943, compromise became collaboration. The result was the Packard Merlin, the same heart, now beating at scale. Packard produced over 55,000 engines. They powered the American P-51 Mustang, which turned the air war in Europe. Before the Mustang, bombers flying to Germany suffered 25% losses per mission. After the Mustang, losses dropped below 5%. It was endurance manufactured, assembled, delivered. It was the triumph of industry over attrition. War transforms not only nations but the people within them. At Fisher and Ludlow, workers lived in two worlds. By day, they worked beside machines louder than thunder. By night, they endured ration lines and air raids. Psychologists later called it industrial stoicism, a mental adaptation that allowed civilians to endure endless repetition under pressure. One worker put it simply, "It wasn't courage, it was momentum. We kept going because stopping meant defeat." For the pilots, that stoicism took another form. Inside the cockpit, the Merlin's vibration became part of the body. Oil pressure, manifold pressure, throttle, all became instinct. When veterans recalled the war, they spoke less of fear than of sound. The hum of the propeller, the whine of the supercharger, the heartbeat of the Merlin. That connection between factory and fighter, between machine and human, was invisible but vital. World War II was not only a conflict of armies, it was a conflict of systems. The Axis fought with ideology. The Allies fought with integration. Factories became battlefields. Supply chains became front lines. The toy factory in Manchester symbolized a truth that militaries still study. Industrial capacity is strategy. Wars are not won by generals alone, but by machinists, designers, and welders. Victory belongs to the nation that can adapt faster than its enemy can destroy. By 1944, more than 160,000 people worked on Merlin-related production in Britain. 30% were women. Half had no engineering background. Every bolt they turned, every gasket they sealed, extended Britain's reach in the air. May 1945. The war ended. The assembly lines fell silent. The blackout curtains came down. The toy factory returned to civilian life. Tin cars, bright and harmless, rolled off the conveyors again. But the people were not the same. They carried the memory of noise, the hum of effort, the echo of an engine that had defined their existence. Historians later called it the hidden front, a war waged in shadows, where ordinary people built extraordinary machines. Few medals were given, few names were recorded. But without those workers, without that factory, there would have been no victory. Peace did not erase purpose, it complicated it. Many workers found silence unbearable. For years, the rhythm of machinery had given them identity. Now the machines had stopped. When production returned to toys, many felt disoriented. They had built engines that had shaped the world. Now they were asked to make trinkets again. "We went from thunder to tinkling," one machinist said. It was hard to feel small again. The war had changed more than economies, it had changed expectations. Women had proven capable of endurance once thought impossible. And yet, in peace, they were told to step aside. Factories reverted to peacetime hierarchies. The benches that had held crankcases now held toy molds again. Victory had come at the cost of transformation. By the 1950 seconds, the Merlin was obsolete. Jet engines replaced pistons. But its legacy endured. At airshows, restored Spitfires and Mustangs roared across the sky. Children covered their ears, laughing. Few knew the sound came from a factory that once made toys for children like them. Historians still debate what the Merlin represented. Engineering triumph? Moral paradox? Human adaptability? Perhaps all of them. The engine became a mirror showing both destruction and resilience. Across the Atlantic, Packard's factories faced the same silence. During the war, they had been cathedrals of noise. Afterward, they were mausoleums. In 1947, a Rolls-Royce engineer visiting Detroit wrote, "The machines stand silent, as if waiting for war again. They were not built for peace." It was a confession shared on both sides of the ocean. They had built engines so perfect they no longer fit in a world of imperfection. The toy factory and the motor company shared the same truth. To win peace, they first had to become instruments of war. The Second World War proved that industry itself could become a weapon. The toy factory was a symbol of that transformation. Every rivet, every bolt, every gear was both mechanical and moral. Each one raised the same question: how far should civilization go to defend itself? The workers who built engines for destruction did so not out of malice, but out of necessity. Their work was not violence, it was survival. And in that distinction lies the humanity of war. The Merlin's roar never truly faded. It became the soundtrack of victory. To a pilot, it meant survival. To a machinist, it meant endurance. To a child, it meant the sky was still theirs. In 2014, when a restored Spitfire took flight, an elderly woman in the crowd wept. She had been a machinist at Fisher and Ludlow in 1942. She said quietly, "That sound, we used to live by it. And now, I suppose, we live because of it." The story of the toy factory is not about engines or factories. It is about adaptation, the ability of ordinary people to meet impossible demands. It reminds us that wars are not won by weapons alone, but by will. Technology is neutral until it is given purpose. The same imagination that builds toys can build engines. The same hands that forge joy can forge survival. This is the paradox of civilization. To protect innocence, it must sometimes turn innocence into strength. In 2022, a Merlin engine built at Fisher and Ludlow in 1943 was restored. It had been found in a barn, rusted, seized, but whole. When the restorers turned the propeller, the pistons moved freely. After months of work, they fueled it with 100-octane avgas. The ignition clicked, the engine coughed, then it roared. The sound filled the hangar, rolling like thunder. People stopped outside, looking up instinctively, as if expecting a Spitfire to appear from the clouds. That sound was more than history. It was human memory, made mechanical. The toy factory that built it is gone. Its workers are gone. But their creation still breathes. It is proof of something simple, something eternal, that even in war, creation can be an act of hope. That even in destruction, humanity leaves behind the echo of making. And in that echo, across generations, the engines still turn.